too many times. It's not fun, I'm sure y'all. Wow, there's a lot of people here. Thank you for coming. I'm Joe's sister, Liz. I'm the youngest of the 7, and I'm gonna let my daughter read this verse. My brothers, who are remaining in our family now, are Steve and David, and they live out west, and they couldn't be here. And they emailed us some writings that they wrote, just short ones. So I asked Andrew if she'd read one from David, or Steve, who's the oldest.
I'm Adri, and I'm Joe's niece. And this is from his biggest brother. And I'm gonna try to do it some justice. Jojo, we called him. A pet name for a most sweet-natured little guy that appeared always so adorable. He always looked like a little weightlifter, and he could put away the protein to feed those muscles. Never a problem, always a sweetie. He and Brother Mark played all day, never old enough to do chores. I envied him. We older ones did the work, took the beatings, and the little guys played on. During Joe's teen years, I was gone, so I missed his growing up, but in his later years, we two came together again, and we had some adjustments to make, and we did. We were at Snake Island together, and Joe had become a doppelganger of Ulysses S. Grant, cigar and all. Joe's greatest joy in life seemed to be his eagerness to reinvent the wheel in many situations. I'm too lazy and impatient for that. Joe and I had one truly common interest, history. No, it wasn't carrying railroad ties down behind his house to build a terrace. And there are secret passions, too, that we shared, but I won't tell any secrets here. Jojo had greatness in him, too, and I like to sit and speculate how that would soon have emerged.
And then this is from David, who is the third brother down from the top. Whenever I think of Joe, my thoughts immediately flash back to the day he was born. When we picked Mom and Joe up at the hospital in Litchfield, Minnesota, and rode in the old car to Brother Wachtel's apartment, who was the pastor at the time, about all I cared to observe, being very young myself and curious too, was Joe's face and body, which was beet red from top to bottom. On that day, he just cried as hard as he could with his eyes shut and looked very angry. Back at Eden Valley, Mom and Dad had us all stand in a row behind the parsonage so we could have our family picture taken. Dan, who was the youngest at that time, stood next to me. Judy, then Steve, and Mom, who was holding Joe in her arms, and then Dad. It wasn't long after this picture was taken that we moved to the small town of Holton, Wisconsin. Joe was just a tiny little baby then. From the day Mark was born in Stillwater until his untimely death in 1997, those two were inseparable. I never saw them far apart from one another at any time during their early life together. They always walked to school together, no matter where it was. They sat together in church. They always played together, watched television together, rode in the back seat next to each other. At the dinner table, they always sat next to each other. I know they really loved one another as truly as only two small brothers ever could. When Mark died, Joe's heart just sank. He was speechless and spent many days in denial. I never really knew what was going through his mind during this time, but fairly obviously, Joe was struggling to get on with his life without Mark in it. Joe has a scar right where Mark accidentally tossed Mom's kitchen knife and struck him in the temple near his right eye. Joe has another scar on his face left there from the time up at Cutaway Lake when Carl Jennings, our cousin, caught him with a fishing lure while casting off the dock where he and Joe were standing one behind the other. Joe was at least 5 years younger than me, which means we had different circles of friends. Consequently, our experiences too were not always shared between us for the same reason. Although Joe was not the intellectual type, he was smart, detailed, and careful in all of the tasks he endeavored to perform. I would not jump to any fast conclusions as to any of his failures in life, since it may probably be true that if Joe, being who he was, couldn't accomplish a given task successfully, I wonder who could if they had to walk a day in his shoes. I know very little about Joe's personal spiritual life, except that while we were living in Dixon at the time, he demonstrated it many times over. He involved himself in every activity the rest of us were involved in, and would to this day have had much to say about the part he played in each instance if he were able to now. Joe was an important active player in the spiritual life of the Berean youth there, and among those who came to the church to be edified. The Berean movement going on in Dixon at the time Joe lived there, and while I was there, very much included him as one of its most vital constituents among his peers. Joe was just one who helped keep the movement in Dixon alive, morally and spiritually. Most or all of those who remain close to Dixon and remember Joe do not hesitate to talk well of him still. And that's very true. Well, regrettably, I have to stop here now as my time has all run out, but I want to repeat the fact that I love Joe very much and will miss him as much or more than I miss my other brothers, Daniel and Mark, and my sister Judy, and Mom and Dad. I only hope and pray that in God's wonderful coming kingdom that one day we will all meet again and share our lives with one another and spend eternity together, singing and praising God like we used to do, at least as much, and laugh and enjoy living as much as we always have done in the past. Joe, every day I will stop at least once to think about and remember you. Last autumn when you were here, you asked me to always remember you. Joe, I will do this for you for the rest of my life. And Joe, I will never forget how much you truly affected my life then as you have now. I hope to see you again, little brother. I love you. Maranatha, Dave. And so, I'm just blown away by the things. You guys just nailed it. I can't, there's nothing more I can say. There's nobody in the world like him. His funny expressions, just by looking at you, you laugh your head off. He was so funny, and I'm gonna really miss my big brother. And so I would like to dedicate a portion of a poem by William Wordsworth, Ode, Intimations on Immortality, to my brother Joe Graham, who couldn't be with us today because he had a play date with Mark and a singing engagement with Lois and Ed, Dan and Judy. Kind of makes it easier to imagine it that way. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight, though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower. We will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in the years that bring the philosophic mind.